Being with us, the French Prime Minister is describing the signing of a new trade deal with the United States as a dark day for Europe. François Bayrou condemns an imbalanced deal where EU imports are subject to 15% tariffs with no retaliation, he says, on US exports into Europe. Well, let's debate the situation. Could Europe have done better is possibly the question we're posing. Douglas Herbert is here with us to kick us off on this conversation. He, of course, France 24's international affairs commentator. What is the situation, Doug? I mean, because we have some saying that Europe is getting the best deal it can under difficult circumstances, but François Bayrou complaining and calling it a dark day. How do you see it?
Well, first of all, you used the precise term, some say, right? Now, the EU, right? Ursula von der Leyen is the one who sat with Donald Trump at his golf resort and hammered out this deal. The EU is 27 separate members. Each of those 27 members, Mark, has their own divergent economic interests. They are all essentially fighting their own corners. I know, yes, the EU, we know the talk. It's a big single market. The EU in Brussels does make this type of trade policy on behalf of the bloc. It is still subject to approval. Legally, she could have just rammed this through, but she's going to go back and ask for the approval. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You mentioned France. It is France's prime minister who's calling it a dark day for Europe. He's speaking for France. He's speaking for some other Europeans, but not all of them. Let's remember a couple of things that I think are just important for the context. First of all, the biggest exporters to the United States of goods in the European Union, it's not France. Germany comes first. Ireland is second. Italy is third. France is less exposed than those three other countries, Mark. However, you can argue it has a lot to complain about. And what I mean by that, it's not just that the French are known for griping all the time. The thing that they are most worried about is that they are the EU's biggest agricultural producer. Agricultural products are going to be hit potentially hard by this tariff deal, as are, what's the other thing you think of when you think France?
I can make a long list.
Luxury goods. Well, luxury goods, right? Perfumes, cosmetics, that sector too.
Champagne.
Also, wines and spirits. That sector too stands to be hard hit. So one of the reasons beyond the polarization in France and the political landscape being fractured and split every which way is the fact that they do have a valid argument that they could get a raw deal compared to the others. Germany, at least with its cars, that's its biggest export, at least got something locked in that will sort of semi-protect some of its big automakers like Audi, BMW.
Indeed. Donald Trump making much of his German roots as well as his Scottish roots. I know he was speaking with Keir Starmer at his Turnberry golf course in Scotland a little earlier. Scottish on his mother's side. The German aspect comes from his father's side of the family. Drumpf, I think, was the original.
That was the
not
original.
Trump. They changed it, didn't they? They changed it from the German Drumpf to Trump. Let's bring in now for more. Doug, you'll be back in a second. Don't panic. Hélène Conway-Mouret is a French senator and vice-chairman of the Foreign Affairs Defence Committee. Hélène, thank you for joining us. I understand you're in your car in Dublin, so thank you for taking the time to pull up and park and talk to us here on France 24. We always appreciate your participation. I'm wondering where you stand on this situation. François Bayrou saying it's a dark day for Europe. He's talking about submission in terms of what this deal is doing. What's your perspective?
Well, it is the same, and thank you for having me, even though I'm on the move indeed. Yes, I share the Prime Minister's concerns. I'm appalled. I'm absolutely appalled. I mean, this is a deal that we're trying to get for a temporary stability in the name of a couple of lobbies that are very active, of course, in Brussels, trying to get the best deal for themselves. And that is at the expense of the overall of what the EU should be standing for. To start with, I do not know why we need to have these tariffs. And we see Donald Trump is not using them for economic reasons. With Brazil, for instance, it's a political tool. And it is just a very asymmetric agreement. Because if we were to have an overall agreement, then we should have put services and goods in the same and see if indeed it's totally unbalanced and maybe try to kind of reach out, some kind of consensus. But it is not the case. So I think, looking at the details of what we are actually giving up in the names of indeed reducing, the tariffs on spirits and the car industry and whatever, it is, I think, our own autonomy that we're giving up because we're buying, billions of gas and oil from the Americans. We're going to buy billions, hundreds of billions of army equipment, and all of that just to appease Daddy, because it's not Uncle Sam anymore. He's got much closer now, and it is Daddy that we are calling upon whenever we're in trouble. So no, I'm appalled. I think we're just showing our overall weakness, that we are just a group of countries just trying to fight for our own little national interest, and losing out the big picture. So I'm actually quite angry with what's happening.
Let me clarify. The reference to Daddy, of course, is Mark Rutte of NATO referring to Donald Trump as Daddy when they were famously sat side by side discussing the issues regarding Ukraine. And also, Ellen was talking there about the tariffs that Donald Trump was threatening Brazil with, basically saying, stop the trial of Jair Bolsonaro, the far-right former president of Brazil and big admirer of Donald Trump. Otherwise, we'll put big sanctions on your goods. There's a sense there in some people's minds, and Ellen has just touched on this, Doug, that Trump is doing this because he can.
Yeah, he's using tariffs.
Because he can.
Because he can, and no one can stop him. He has the economic might. You could still say the supremacy. Obviously, it's not what it was. It once was. There are other up-and-coming economic competitors, but he can still use these tariffs as a cudgel, and that's exactly what he has done. He has used it as a cudgel to ram through what he would say is his America First reindustrialization policy, bringing manufacturing back to America, bringing jobs back to America, and basically trying to level what he says is a very unlevel playing field. Let's remember, it is true that the EU has imported or supplied nearly a fifth of all of the U.S. goods imports last year. 20% of all worldwide, everything that the U.S. imported was brought in by the EU. So in that sense, EU had what you call a commercial, what's the opposite of surplus? I was going to say the opposite of deficit is surplus. Big surplus, bringing in a lot of goods ahead of, you might say, the immediate neighbors, ahead of Mexico, ahead of the trade with Canada, even ahead with the trade with China, not to mention the United Kingdom, a little lower down on that list. In return, what's interesting about this is European goods are not, at least for now, going to face any higher tariffs coming into Europe. So we just heard the senator speaking about asymmetric, lopsided. It is very lopsided. Essentially, the EU is taking big lumps here because some people would say they cried uncle. They caved because they just think they don't have a choice. Their first concern was protecting their own industries, protecting their interests. As you said, Trump is doing this because he can. And the EU, the defenders of this deal would say, are accepting these terms because they must.
Indeed. Let's bring back in Hélène Conway-Mouret, who's joining us from Ireland, just outside Dublin there, French Senator and Vice Chair of the Foreign Affairs Defence Committee. Hélène, you said you're angry about this deal. You say you're convinced that it could be better. The EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič said this is clearly the best deal under very difficult circumstances. Clearly you agree. How would you have perhaps done it better, do you think? What should Europe have done?
Well, I do not agree that we must accept it, but we are in a difficult situation. We're caught up between the short term, which is indeed making sure that our American ally stays with us for the war in Ukraine. But we have to remember that now we're actually purchasing all the American equipment that are being sent to Ukraine, where before the Americans were sending it themselves. So now we're actually participating in the American industry and financing it as well. But we are trying to buy time. So the war in Ukraine is one reason why we need to appease, if you like, Donald Trump and make sure that he stays with us. But in the long term, I think we have a lot to lose, because what we're doing in the name of saving some corners of our, economy and some of our industries and producers, indeed, we are giving up on the overall, as I said, industrialization of Europe that we need, because the 750 billions we're going to spend in buying carbohydrates from the United States, the 600 billions that have been put forward as army equipment that we're going to purchase, it's all European taxpayers' money going to finance the development of American industry. And the almighty power of the United States is not that great if Donald Trump has rightly decided that it needs to be strengthened, because it is actually surviving because the Europeans are also, through their savings, financing the American debt. So all of that is for Europe to be just the one continent that is to develop and finance the American industry so that it can, keep up in the race it engaged with China. And I do not believe that it is our role. I think we have better things to do. And the rest of the world is actually looking at us. We were envied by a lot of countries. We were trusted. And now I see on the political field that in the Middle East, the Europeans are not called upon in the negotiations. The tensions between Cambodia and Thailand were not resolved with the help of the Europeans, which is what we have been doing so far. So I think we're just losing our place, our overall place, just for economic reasons. And Donald Trump is doing a very good job. He has set himself objectives, but I do not believe that it is our role, and that's all we're reduced to actually, make sure that the manner in which he does it or the aims that he wants to reach are for us to support. That's all. I don't think that's our,
so Hélène, sorry to cut across you. Should there have been then some kind of retaliation in terms of tariffs? Should France have been slapped? Go ahead.
Well, what we should have done is to look at an overall package. As I said, indeed, we have a surplus for goods, but the huge debt in services coming from the United States. Look at the overall package and say, well, can we find a balance? Maybe there are some sectors, indeed, that needs to be, realigned or whatever. But just this overall 15% tariff is just mad. And indeed, I was in Washington last March, and I met the Minister of Finance there, and what he said was extremely interesting. He said, look, Donald Trump is going to apply tariffs, but we go for the highest, and we'll always get more than we actually deserve in the end, because, if we start at 100, you'll feel that if you pay, 50, that you have done a good deal, when in fact, at 25, that would have been a good deal for you, but we'll always get more. And that's what Donald Trump is at, and is quite, is quite successful, because we're showing weaknesses. We're not showing unity, and we're just counting on the short term rather than looking at the overall picture and playing the long term.
Hélène Conway-Mouret, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Ireland. That's the Hélène Conway-Mouret, who's French Senator and Vice Chair of the Foreign Affairs Defence Committee. And thanks also to Douglas Herbert, as always, our international affairs commentator. Great to see you, Doug. And thanks again to you, Hélène Conway-Mouret.